program in Ecuador, organized with the support of the Embassy of Ecuador in India. We hope that you already have more information about the profiles of each other, and now you will have the opportunities to make some networking. This time is the first and the only one exposition that we have in English during this first edition, so we hope all of you enjoy it. The methodology will be the same as yesterday. Our speaker will have 30 minutes and you will have 15 minutes for questions.
Perfect.
Okay, so before you start, Somia, I am very honored today. Salam alaikum, bonjour, buonasera. Welcome to Ecuador, welcome to Latin America, Somia. We have, as I was telling you, people from literally many countries of the region: Guatemala, Costa Rica, Colombia, Chile, the United States, and Canada. So today we are very honored to host as our second speaker, my friend, Mrs. Somia Hadef, who is a career diplomat of Algeria. She will explain to us how science diplomacy works in her country. And she holds a master's degree in defense and security. She is fluent, of course, in Arabic, French, English, and since she's living in Italy, right now she's trying to learn some Italian too. Right now, she's the first secretary at the Embassy of Algeria in Rome, where she's in charge of the cooperation with Bosnia and Herzegovina, Malta, and San Marino. She dreams of visiting our region, Latin America, so I am absolutely sure that this could be an amazing opportunity to officially invite my friend Somia to come to Ecuador, okay? So after this short introduction, welcome Somia.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be with you today to talk about Algeria's science diplomacy. As you know, science diplomacy is a very fascinating subject, so I can talk about it for hours, but since we do have only 30 minutes, I'll try only to give you a general idea about what we try to do at the Algerian MFA in the field of science. So we will talk, let me just change the slide. We will talk about Algeria's science diplomacy assets and objectives, its evolution throughout history, its state of play, and its deficiencies and challenges. So to start with, just to remind you, this is the map of Algeria. Algeria is a Mediterranean country. It's situated in the north of Africa. It's the largest country in Africa. It's a young country since more than 30% of its inhabitants are aged between 15 and 30. It's the fourth largest economy in Africa after South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt. It's the second military power in Africa, and its economy is mainly based in hydrocarbons. It has been occupied throughout its history by many foreign powers. The last one was France from 1830 to 1962. It's internationally known for its War of National Liberation, for its pacifist policy and support for just causes. It's a multicultural country, and its strategic geographical location gives it the assets to assume the role of a major regional player. So what are the Algeria science diplomacy assets? In the national system of research and science, education in Algeria is a constitutional right guaranteed free of charge. Algeria has a very large network of vocational education and higher education establishments that are attended by 1.5 million of students, 85% of whom are scholarship recipients. Between 6 and 9% of the state's budget is allocated every year to higher education, vocational training, and scientific research sectors. It was precisely 7.8% of the budget of 2021. Algeria has a large public scientific research network, more than 1,470 research laboratories, more than 2,600 permanent researchers, mobilizing more than 36,000 teacher researchers. Its linguistic diversity gives the ability to interact with foreign counterparts. The sector of science and research had been regulated since 1983. The economic dynamic of the Algeria stimulates the development of sciences. And our scientists are very involved in the development of our public policies through many public bodies. The most recent example is, of course, the role played by the scientific committee in charge of the COVID-19, what we call the science in diplomacy. I'm sure that Lionel told you about this yesterday. Algeria has a very large scientific diaspora abroad. It has a large diplomatic and consular network, which allows it to have scientific collaboration with most of the countries of the world. Ecuador also, we have an Algerian agency for international cooperation, which focuses on developing cooperation links, especially with African countries, including in the field of science. Algeria is an active member of many regional and international organizations, and it's very committed to the multilateral science diplomacy. Our science diplomacy involves many actors. Of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through its embassies, consulates, and institutes, the Algerian Agency for International Cooperation, the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, the Ministry of Defense, because in some of our embassies, we do have also military offices. We work also with technical ministries and their specialized bodies. We work with our scientific diaspora abroad, with many public bodies in charge of research and study. Some of them are under the presidency of the Republic and some others under the Prime Minister. And more recently, our parliament got involved in science diplomacy, especially in this period of the COVID-19. What are our objectives? Our science diplomacy, like the science diplomacy of any country in the world, aim to increase our influence, especially in the region of Africa and the Mediterranean, to face regional and global challenges such as global warming, damage to biodiversity, sustainable development, to promote Algeria's model of higher education and scientific research, to attract foreign researchers and scientists, to provide our country with technological transfer and foreign know-how, and above all, and most of all, the most important thing is to support our policy of diversifying the national economy. As I told you, our economy is based on hydrocarbons. So our science diplomacy is working on supporting our national policy to diversify our economy. So science diplomacy of Algeria throughout history, some people say that our science diplomacy dates back to the 1st century. During the Roman era, when the city of Medoros sheltered one of the eldest universities in the world. This is a picture of Medoros. It's situated in the east of the country. It attracted at that time a lot of scholars and students from all over the world. In the 11th century, the Hammadid capital Bijaya, which is a Mediterranean city situated in the east of the country, played the role of a cultural and scientific hub in all the Mediterranean region. But it's in modern times that Algeria's science diplomacy really flourished. Algeria's science diplomacy went through 4 main periods. The first period is from the start of the National War of Liberation to the late 60s. In this period, Algerian science diplomacy focused on training Algerian competences abroad in order to prepare them to manage the country, which was oriented towards such socialist and non-aligned countries like China, USSR, Cuba, and some other Arabic countries. Those friendly countries sent in this period many scientists and many researchers to Algeria to help us build the young Algerian state, and we are very grateful to them. Ideological divergence between Algeria and Western countries in this period, we also developed many scientific collaborations with Western countries like France, especially, what we call science for diplomacy. The second period comes from the 70s to the 80s. In this period, we realized the necessity to develop also scientific collaborations with developed countries. We established the first scholarship for African and Arab students. Algeria allows more than 2,000 scholarships every year to foreigners. Most of them are Africans and Arabs. This is a part of our policy to give assistance to African countries. In this period also, we attracted a lot of foreign scientists by the dynamic of our economy. And in this period, we created various public organisms in charge of development of sciences and research. The notoriety that Algeria enjoyed in this period on the international scene enabled it to play the role of mediator in many crises and conflicts, and to assume at the same time the promotion of scientific exchanges between some countries in breach of diplomatic relations, such as Iran and the United States, what we call science for diplomacy. The third period is the period of the 90s. Personally, I consider it as a period of decline because it was a very difficult period that we went through because of the economic and political crisis. Algeria went through a whole decade of disorder and insecurity, with what we call it the Black Decade in Algeria, because it was marked by the emergence of terrorist groups. And in the end of this decade, more than 200,000 victims were killed, most of them civilians. Algeria was very isolated in this period at the regional and international levels and knew its biggest exodus of intellectual class, mainly scientists and researchers. They fled the country. And science diplomacy was naturally at its lowest level in this period. From the beginning of 2000 until today, our science diplomacy was relaunched because Algeria has gradually made its return to the regional and international scenes. We worked to restore our image, and science diplomacy was one of the tools to restore this image. We adopt also a strategy of diversification of partners in the scientific field, hand in hand with that of diversifying economic partners. So we established scientific cooperations with many Asian countries, Latin American countries, not only developed countries. The creation in 2002 by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Diplomatic and International Relations Institute is very important in this period because it made it possible to raise the awareness among our diplomats about the importance of science diplomacy. And from this date, we started to use the theme or the word science diplomacy in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So what is the state of play of Algeria's science diplomacy? I've chosen here some examples of concrete examples of science diplomacy. We can divide them into three levels: science diplomacy towards developed countries, science diplomacy towards developing countries, and science diplomacy within regional and international organizations. So let's start with science diplomacy towards developed countries, what we call North-South cooperation. We have the case of France. I call it the specific case because of the fact of the French influence on the Algerian sector of scientific research and innovation. You know, France is the former colonial power, and it preserved after the independence of Algeria a very closed ties with Algeria politically, economically, and culturally. So France has a big influence on our system of science and research. We can see that through the use of French language, for example, in higher education. We can see it through the use of French in the scientific publications. And if you ask any researcher or Algerian student, which is the first country he wants to go to work or to collaborate, he will say France. So we have a big French influence. The Algerian-French scientific cooperation is a part of a global partnership agreement between the two countries that was signed in 2007, and that revolves around numerous scholarship programs and many projects for the exchange of expertise and support for skills development. I can cite some of them, not all of them. The Algerian-French Conference for Higher Education and Research, which is presided by the two ministers of higher education of the two countries. The Uber-Curien-Tassili partnership. This partnership, I participated to one of its sessions. It consists in gathering and defining together themes on which PhD students from France and from Algeria have to work together on for a period of 3 or 4 years. And in the end of this period, we published the results of these joint research projects in Algeria and France. So it's a very concrete example of bilateral science diplomacy. We have also the Algerian-French higher education program, what we call the ProFAS program. This is a mobility program for PhD students, master students, and professionals. We have many bilateral programs of training in human and social sciences, especially in the field of archaeology. With the United States of America, we signed the Scientific and Technological Cooperation Agreement in 2006, within which we implemented many joint research projects. We benefit every year from the Fulbright scholarship. I'm sure you know them. We have developed in recent years many R&D projects in the oil sector because the United States are one of our main partners in the oil sector, and the oil sector is the main or the most important sector for our economy. And I have to stress here the important role played by associations and non-state actors in promoting scientific exchanges between our two countries. Like, for example, the role played by the Algerian American Association of Scientists. This is an association created by our scientific diaspora in the US. They work with our Washington in order to promote the scientific collaborations between the two countries. Here in the picture, you can see the inauguration of the International American School of Algiers. You have our Ministry of Higher Education and the Ambassador of the United States in Algiers. With Canada, we have also good cooperation in the field of science. We signed in 2014 a memorandum of understanding between the National Commission of Algerian Universities and its Canadian counterpart. And within this memorandum of understanding, we established many inter-university agreements. We organize as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs every year what we call the Scientific and Cultural Days of members of the Algerian community established in Canada. We have an important community established in Canada, which is characterized by its highly qualified qualifications, especially in the French-speaking region of Quebec. So this community, we try to keep in touch with it and to involve it in promoting the scientific collaboration with Canada. In the picture, you can see an Algerian, Jordanian, Canadian cooperation for the production of the COVID-19 tests in Algeria. The last year we established it. This is manufacturing for production of the COVID-19 tests. With Japan and South Korea, we have a good cooperation also in scientific field, but it's very recent. It was established at the same moment of the establishment of the economic cooperation with those two countries. With Japan, for example, in 2019, we launched the partnership program in scientific and technological research for sustainable development funded by the JICA. With Korea, the KOICA finances every year many scholarships for Algerian students. In 2019, for example, we signed more than 11 twinning and partnership between Algerian and Korean universities. Currently, we are working on a project of the creation of a mixed Algerian-Korean university in order to create a kind of African technological pole in order to train African students and African researchers. Science diplomacy towards developing countries, what we call the South-South cooperation. Of course, China is the best example here because China is a traditional and historical partner to Algeria. Our diplomatic relations dates back to 1958, even before our independence. So you imagine how our political ties are strong. In 2014, we were the first Arabic country to sign a global strategic partnership agreement with China, including scientific and technological cooperation, as well as the transfer of expertise in different sectors. We have many scholarships for Algerian PhD students. We have a good cooperation in medical research and medicine because China was the first country to send a medical mission to Algeria in 1963. And since then, we established a very good cooperation in the medical sector. We have also good cooperation in civilian nuclear energy. The cooperation between the Algerian Space Agency and the Chinese Academy of Space Technologies has made it possible to develop and launch the first Algerian communication satellite in 2017. Here in the picture, you can see the staff of the Algerian Space Agency, which worked in Beijing for a few months on this project. And behind them, you have the Alcomsat one. With Russia, we have good cooperation in many fields, but I will cite only one of them, which is the transfer of military technology. Algeria is the third client of the Russian industry of armament and the first client in Africa. We have a very historical cooperation in the military field that dates back to our the period of the 60s and the 70s. So our science diplomacy worked and pleaded for transfer of military technology in recent years. In the medical field, for example, our government opted for the Russian anti-COVID Sputnik 5 vaccine because we agreed with the Russian government on technology transfer through the launch of joint production of the vaccine in Algeria in the next few months. That's why we didn't opt for the Pfizer. With Jordan, we do have also good cooperation in pharmaceutical industry that made it possible to produce many medicines in Algeria. We have many scholarships for students. With Latin America, I will cite only Cuba, but we do have great cooperation also with Mexico, with Brazil. Cuba is a historical and traditional partner to Algeria. We are bound by scientific and technical cooperation agreement since 1976. Here in the picture, you can see a group of Cuban doctors working in Algeria. And behind them, this is the first ophthalmological Cuban clinic opened in Julfa. It's a region in Algeria in the desert. And since 2008, Cuba has opened 5 modern Cuban ophthalmological clinics, which are equipped also with research laboratories. And those clinics works with the mixed staff, Algerian doctors and Cuban doctors, exchanging their experiences together. More than 1,000 Cuban doctors are working currently all around Algeria. With South Africa, which is a good cooperation between Algeria and African countries, we established in 2009 a joint scientific conference, which is presided by our 2 ministries of higher education. We periodically gather and define what are the research projects on which we have to work together, and what's the amount of the funding that needs to be allocated to these projects. In recent years, for example, more than 200 million euros were allocated to more than 10 research projects in nanotechnology, biotechnology, renewable energies. We also have a good cooperation in the space technologies because South Africa is a pioneer in Africa in the field of space technologies. We also have good cooperation in aeronautical sector. Concerning the regional and multilateral science diplomacy, I will give some examples. The first one is African Union. We are one of the 55 state members of the African Union. We are very committed to Africa. And our continent adopted in 2014 a strategy in science, technology, and innovation, what we call the SISTA. And in order to implement this continental strategy, we created many institutional bodies, such as the African Observatory of Science, Technology, and Innovation, the Pan-African Intellectual Property Organization, the African Space Agency, and the Pan-African University. The Pan-African University, for example, is constituted by 5 excellency institutes spread all over the regions of Africa. Algeria hosts one of and energy. South Africa, I think, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Kenya host the other 4 institutes. These institutes aim to train African students in many specific sectors. We also host the African Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism. As I told you before, we acquired very good expertise in the field of fighting terrorism and radicalism, and we are trying to share this experience with our partners. So this center works on the phenomenon of terrorism, and Africa, unfortunately, still suffer from this threat until today. Within the League of Arab States, we are one of the 22 state members of the League of Arab States. We benefit and fund at the same time many scholarship and mobility programs for Arab students. Within this regional organization, many sub-regional organizations in charge of science were created through in recent years, such as, for example, the Arab Civil Aviation Organization, the Arab Atomic Energy Agency. Algeria hosts the Arab Center for the Prevention of the Dangers of Earthquakes and Other Natural Disasters. All of these organizations works with a mixed staff constituted by many experts from all the Arab world. So this is a concrete example of regional science diplomacy. Within the European Union is one of our most important partners in the region. More than 60% of our imports come from the European Union, but we refuse to be only a market for the European products. We pleaded in recent years to benefit also from technological transfer. So we insisted to sign in 2013 an agreement on scientific and technological cooperation. We pleaded also to benefit and research and scientific projects such as the project PRIMA. This is a partnership for research and innovation in the Mediterranean area, which focuses on water and agriculture sectors. We also participate to the BlueMed project, which is an European project funded by the European Commission and focusing on the Mediterranean Sea. Since 2015, we participated in the European Erasmus program. I'm sure most of you have heard about it because I checked that many Latin American countries benefit from this program. This is a mobility program for master degree students and PhD students, as well as researchers. Within the Mediterranean bodies, we participate to many regional initiatives. I can cite only one of them, the Western Mediterranean Forum for Research, Innovation and Higher Education of the 5+5 Dialogue. The 5+5 Dialogue is a regional forum that gathers the 5 countries of the Maghreb with 5 European countries. So this is a good example of regional science diplomacy. In the UN system, we participate to most of the United Nations organizations, especially the UNESCO. This is a good example of multilateral science diplomacy. We benefit from the International Hydrological Program, the UNESCO Chairs Program, the Man and Biosphere Program, and some other programs in the ecological field. Those were only some examples. Of course, I can cite all of them, but I was a little bit disappointed to see that we don't have cooperation with Ecuador in the field of science. So I count on you to change that. So what are Algeria's science diplomacy deficiencies and challenges? The deficiencies, as you know, the field of science and research remains largely dominated by developed countries. They product more than 80% of global scientific production. The inequalities between the North and the South in terms of scientific development has repercussions on the place that science diplomacy occupy in our foreign policies. So while for developed countries, science diplomacy is very important and is a tool of soft power, for us as developing countries, we keep giving the primacy in our foreign policies to the political and economic aspects. Science comes at last. So I consider personally that Algeria's science diplomacy still remains in its embryonic level due to the limits of our system, national system of sciences and research, which needs to be reformed. We suffer also from a lack of coordination between the MFA and the other ministries, which is essential to define the short and long-term objective of our science diplomacy. Our diplomats need to be made aware of the role of science diplomacy and to be more trained and equipped to master all the aspects of science. We don't have guide documents defined in the conduct to be adopted in the field of science diplomacy prepared by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I hope in the future we will adopt such document, which is essential to have an effective and efficient science diplomacy. Our science diplomacy remains marked by the primacy of regulatory aspect. I mean that we give a lot of importance to the signature of agreements, scientific cooperation agreements, rather than carrying out concrete joint action. So this is very bureaucratic. We lose a lot of time preparing these agreements, and this is how we lose some opportunities. As a developing country, Algeria is not immune to the influence exerted by science diplomacy of developed countries, especially European countries, because of our geographical location. What are the challenges for our science diplomacy? I think the most important challenge is to strengthen human capital, Algerian human capital, and facilitate the brain circulation rather than the brain drain, which still remain our biggest problem. We have also to implement more scientific cooperation and joint research programs on global themes like climate change, global health, cybersecurity. This is very important because in the period of the COVID-19, we realized the importance of the scientific collaboration to face together those global challenges. And our science diplomacy has also to serve our national policy of economic diversification, particularly in some key sectors like agriculture, renewable energies, blue economy, development of the desert region. As you have seen on the map, 80% of our territory is desert. So we have to give importance to develop in these desert regions. We have also to focus on filling the shortcomings recorded by Algeria in certain areas, especially in this period of COVID-19. We realized that we had a lack in terms of digitalization, for example, in terms of connectivity, pharmaceutical industry. So these are the key sectors we have, our science diplomacy has to focus on in the future. We have to take more profit from our large scientific diaspora, and we have to involve more female. I consider that women are not enough implicated in science and research field. So as a conclusion, I consider that Algeria actually currently is at a turning point in its history, not only because of the difficult economic situation it's facing currently because of the COVID-19 and the collapse of the oil prices, but also because of the political changes that are operating in Algeria. You know, since February 2019, Algeria witnessed what we call Shirak. This is a peaceful protest movement. And this movement, led by the youth, requested deep reforms, political and economic reforms, and led to a new class of ruling people. So we have to seize this turning point in our history as an opportunity to build what we call a new Algeria, where human capital will be a cornerstone. Our public authorities have shown, especially in this period of the COVID-19, their readiness to invest more in developing science and research. So I'm very optimistic about the future of our science diplomacy. I think we realize the importance of science diplomacy, and we will work in the next few years in order to improve it. So here, just to conclude, these are some pictures of eminent Algerian scientists. I can cite all of them. These are some of them. So from left to right, you have Mr. Noureddin Melikshi, who is a physicist and inventor in the NASA. You have Mr. Elias Zarhouni, who is a biomedical director of National Institute of Health of the United States of America. On the top of the picture, you have Mrs. Noura Khaldi, which is diabetologist in Ireland. She's very known internationally for her works on diabetes. You have Mrs. Nabila Aghanim, who is a cosmologist, renowned cosmologist in France. You have Mr. Tahar Ammari, who is an astrophysicist working in France also. You have Mr. Hakim Jaballah, who is a virologist and president and CEO of the Kiran Therapeutics in New York. He is known for his works on cancer. You have Mrs. Karima Ait Isa, who is an oncologist in the US. You have on the top left, the top right of the picture, Mr. Belqasem Habba, who is a researcher in software engineering and microelectronics. He works for Google in the US. You have Mr. Karim Zarib, who is known for his works on battery materials and energy storage in Canada. And the last one is Mr. Selim Germouch, who is an associate director of clinical vaccine research and development at Pfizer. He works he worked on the new vaccine of Pfizer on COVID-19. So these were some ambassadors of Algeria. They are the best ambassadors of Algeria, not only the diplomats, scientists abroad, especially successful scientists can be the best ambassadors for our country. So thank you for having heard me. I know I have been a little bit long, so sorry for that. We say that Algerian women are very talkative, so I'm not an exception to that rule. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them and to share my ideas with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Somaya. Now we have the time for questions. So as yesterday, everyone who wants to make a question can raise the hand or write in the chat. So we're going to start with Pedro Figueroa from Chile.
Hello, thank you for this presentation, Somia. I would like to know if there is a difference between science diplomacy and international scientific cooperation.
Okay. So to answer you, the main difference between the two is that science diplomacy is led by the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in order to achieve some goals. But international scientific cooperation can be led by private sector, can be led by universities, by laboratories, without having in mind these national interests. This is the main difference between the two.
Okay, so we are going to continue with Madeline Ortega.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It was such a pleasure to hear you, Sonia. So I have a question. How countries can avoid this brain draining that you mentioned before and reinforce the scientific field, especially in developing countries?
I didn't understand you well. Can you just repeat the beginning of your question? Brain drain? Yes?
Okay, that how countries can avoid this brain draining that you mentioned and how they can reinforce the scientific field, especially in developing countries.
Yes, how to, this is a big problem that we are suffering from. As I told you, in the period of the 90s, for example, we knew our biggest exodus of the intellectual class because of the instability of our country. This was for security matter. But in recent years, we are suffering from brain drain of quality of researchers. They are fleeing the country because they are more considered abroad. They have better conditions to work abroad. So how to avoid that? We have to improve our national systems of science and research. We have to consider more our scientists, our researchers. But if we can't avoid it totally, at least we can take benefit of those people who go abroad. As we are doing as Algeria, we try to keep in touch with them, to involve them in developing our country. Our embassies try to have a good relation with them, and every time we need them, trust me, they respond to the call. I witnessed that myself. Scientists flee their countries not because they don't like their countries, they are nationalists, but they are searching for better conditions to work. This is normal, this is human beings. So at least we can take benefit of them, involve them in projects, in common projects, and this is the least we can do. In my point of view, this is the least we can do. I don't know if I respond to your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we are gonna, okay, is the time for Montserrat Proaño.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Somia, for your explanation. My question is, has Algeria participated in the Horizon 2020 program? And if yes, what has that experience been like?
Which program did you say?
Horizon 2020.
I don't think so. Personally, I don't think that we participate in this program.
It's a program of the UE. the European Union?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question. So
Sorry,
thank you very much.
because the programs you participate to are those I cited in the presentation. We participate
Just Erasmus program.
the most important one. But even the Erasmus, we are not a big beneficial from that compared to Tunisia, for example, Morocco, Israel. We really get a very little part of the program because we are considered by the European Union as a rich country. So this is not totally true in the current situation because we are facing a difficult economic situation. But in recent years, yes, we were having a very good financial situation and we were considered as a very rich country. So all what benefits to developing countries, we were not benefiting from it. So as long as I know, we don't benefit from this program, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have another question from Karina Gutierrez from Ecuador. She says, being Algeria the biggest African country, has your country had the opportunity to lead other African countries in science diplomacy?
We are trying to do so, but we are not we are the largest country. We are not the biggest country. We are one of the leaders of the continent with Nigeria, with South Africa, for example, and we are very committed to the African Union. For example, if you take the participation, the financial participation of Algeria in the African Union, it's one of the biggest ones. So yes, we are trying to have a leading role in the African Union in the field of science. As I show you, we host many African centers of research and we fund many scholarships for Africans. We assist many African countries in the field of science by our expertise. For example, the African countries of the Sahel region. The Sahel region is the region constituted by Mali, Niger, Mauritania, Chad. Those countries have disadvantages economically, so we are trying to help them in the framework of economic field and scientific field. So my response is yes, we are trying to do so.
Okay, thank you so much, Somaya. These were all the questions. So, Sarita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was very happy to be with you. As I told Sarah, I invite all of you to come to visit Algeria. So I'm waiting for you. So please come. And I think that we have a lot in common with Latin American countries and we can do great things in the field of science. So I count on you to improve our cooperation in the field of science. So thanks to all of you and good luck for everyone.
Thank you, Somia. I am absolutely sure that after your complete presentation, we will have some ideas and we can identify in the future, maybe one, 2, 3 projects for each country. Okay, Nicolas, could you share the diploma that we're gonna give our special guest?
Right. Somaya, can you stop sharing, please?
Look the amount of Latinos, Somia. Okay, my dear Somia.
Oh, so sweet.
It has been an honor for us.
My honor. You know, my dream is to visit Latin America. Really, it's really my dream. So I hope after the pandemic, I'll have this opportunity to come and see the Galapagos Islands and then to go and see all of Latin American countries. Thank you. Thank you for everything. It's an honor for me.
It's our pleasure and an honor. So I'm going to read this diploma on behalf of our ambassador in India. He is the person who supported this course. So the Embassy of Ecuador in India would like to thank Somia Hadef for her participation in the course on Science Diplomacy Ecuador, where she spoke about how does science diplomacy work on February 5, 2020. So thank you so much. His name is Cueva.
For everything.
It's our pleasure, and I am absolutely sure, Somia, that you will come. Just one thing for everybody. The way we write her name is Somia, as she wrote, but the pronunciation is Sumeya. Okay?
Somia, what's the meaning? The meaning is majestuous. So,
so, Nicolas, continue, please.
So we're gonna take a picture like yesterday. Everyone, please.
Smile.
You have to say cheese.
Have to say cheese.
Okay. We're gonna take the picture 3 times like yesterday because we are a lot of people.